Well, yesterday there was what they call a dump of 2023 census data by the government agency StatsNZ. Now, it should be based on biological reality and observable data, but StatsNZ is more keen to push gender and sexuality ideology and fabricated data. But that didn't stop the media. Let's check it out. So StatsNZ were shouting from the rooftops yesterday and they said 2023 census shows 1 in 20 adults belong to Aotearoa New Zealand's LGBTIQ plus population. Data from the 2023 census found that 172,383 people, 4.9% of adults, belong to the LGBTIQ or plus or rainbow population, according to data released by StatsNZ today. LGBTIQ plus includes people who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, non-binary, intersex, or have other minority genders or sexual identities. The 2023 census was the first census to collect data from New Zealanders about their gender, sexual identity, and whether they have variation of sex characteristics. And of course, the media were very excited about this.
The first time the census identified our LGBTQI plus population of 172,000 people. That's just under 5% of the adult population.
We're very proud of the work of including this. In some aspects, it's quite world leading.
It's a really exciting day for rainbow communities. There's been decades of advocacy that have led to this.
Yes, and StatsNZ have been on a mission for a while. StatsNZ said in a recent statement that, quote, when rainbow communities are visible, they can represent themselves. That is why Inside Out and Zeal Wellington use data to connect rainbow youth with their communities.
In the 2023 census, for the first time, we're going to be asked about things like sexuality, gender, and sex characteristics. So it's going to be really wonderful to fill that out and feel able to share your full self. The more data we have about our rainbow communities, the more positive change we can make.
So it seems not so much about data collection, but about pushing an agenda. Now, you may be asking, well, how did StatsNZ get their results that we heard yesterday, the 4.9%, the 1 in 20? Well, remember the census, that time when we realised that StatsNZ is now treating our biological sex and our gender as two separate things in order to ram down their non-biological gender ideology in the name of diversity, equity and inclusion and wokeness. Now, let me just take you down memory lane. Remember the census? As soon as you started filling in the census, the ideology immediately kicked in after you were asked where you were born, which is all verifiable information, of course. They ask, what's your gender identity? And they say that gender refers to a person's social and personal identity as male, female, or another gender, or genders that may be non-binary. A person's sex at birth may differ. And the answer options are male, female, and another gender. And then they ask, what was your sex at birth? And unbelievably, there are only two options, male, female. How binary. But then there's more questions, and we get to which of the following best describes how you think of yourself? Heterosexual, straight, gay or lesbian, bisexual, another identity? Actually, shouldn't that be another sexuality? Anyway, and prefer not to say. And I mean, why don't they list them all? I mean, we've got a choice of apparently 112 genders and more than 200 plus sexualities. So list them all. But anyway, now, by the way, the gender question, you might remember, didn't have to be answered. And some people answered the sex question, but not the gender. And some people answered the gender question and not the sex question. Now, however, from that information, StatsNZ, who are very clever, determined whether you were a member of the rainbow community. StatsNZ is very, very clever. They can't figure out that if you're born a female, you are a female, but they can definitely figure out that if you qualify for the special victimhood status of LGBTQI++. And look, they actually have a diagram to explain it all. Cisgender and transgender status was produced through the combination of responses to gender and sex at birth. So they're trying to explain how they got to the LGBT group. So if your answer to gender and sex at birth were the same, no, that doesn't mean you believe in biological truth. StatsNZ said it means you are cisgender, that made up word. And if the answers are different, you must be transgender. They also had a category cisgender and transgender status unidentifiable. Maybe that's all the FamilyFirst supporters who drew XX and XY drawings through all their answers. Now, and I know so many people that refuse to answer those two questions and just did one or the other, as I said, because in the real world, they are the same thing. But don't tell the good people at StatsNZ that, eh? It will blow their minds. And then it said, Rainbow LGBTIQ plus indicator was produced through responses to gender, cisgender and transgender status, sexual identity and variation of sex characteristics, which is intersex, which is actually a totally separate group. I'll come back to that. Now, what was the sexuality question you were asked? Remember I showed you which of the following best describes how you think of yourself: heterosexual, straight, gay or lesbian, bisexual, another identity, and prefer not to say. And so then StatsNZ coded our answers. And it was heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, sexual identity not elsewhere classified, prefer not to say, not elsewhere included. And based on our answers to sex and gender, they coded us as cisgender male, cisgender female, transgender male, transgender female, transgender person of another gender, and cisgender and transgender status unidentifiable. And then they started handing out the rainbow ticks. The rainbow LGBTIQ plus indicator is derived based on responses to gender, sexuality, sexual identity, and variations of sex characteristics, as well as cisgender and transgender status. The LGBTIQ category is derived where one or more of the following responses have been received: another gender, transgender, which is derived, a response that is coded to be homosexual, bisexual, or sexual identity not elsewhere classified, and persons who know they were born with a variation of sexual characteristics. And then it says rainbow LGBTIQ indicator has three output categories. At level 1, you are LGBTIQR plus, you're not LGBTIQ plus, and unidentifiable. In other words, even we don't know. And then at level 2, you are categorized as another gender, transgender, homosexual, bisexual, or sexual identity not elsewhere classified, and persons who know they were born with a variation of sex characteristics. Are you exhausted? But here's the very funny bit. It says individuals can belong to more than one of the level 2 categories. Does that mean you can be heterosexual during the week but bisexual when you go to the music festival maybe? Or identify as transgender but just when you dress up in drag to go read LGBT books at the library to preschoolers and get paid lots of money by the ratepayers to do so? But look, remember that statement that you can belong to more than one group when we get to the final stats, because as you'll see, there could be a lot of double ups. Now, StatsNZ actually admit that the whole system is troublesome for two reasons. Firstly, they say gender and sex at birth received quality ratings of high and very high respectively, but sexual identity, variations of sex characteristics, cisgender and transgender status, and the rainbow LGBTIQ plus indicator all have quality rating of poor. What do they mean by this? Well, self-identity is never a reliable source. That's why physical and mental health issues are based on a robust examination and diagnosis. Gender identity and sexual identity cannot be objectively measured. In fact, of that list, only sex at birth has any credibility to it. The rest are all made-up concepts, including cisgender. Cisgender is a made-up word for normal biology. But here's the second problem. Because we can't define what is a woman based on biological sex, how do we do comparisons with earlier data collection? How do we compare data affecting women when men can now be women and vice versa? As you'll see there, it says, be cautious with time series comparisons between gender and historical sex data because of the conceptual differences between the two variables. In fact, just above this, they actually say this: use of sex at birth data is recommended where there is a specific need to disaggregate males and females at birth, such as for fertility. Yeah, because only women can get pregnant, by the way, and population projections which rely on this specific concept. Wow. Can you see the confusion they are creating for themselves? So anyway, based on their botched, ridiculous and confusing definitions, what was the outcome? Well, the LGBTQI plus indicator showed, and it reports a sexual identity other than heterosexual, so gay or lesbian, bisexual or another sexual identity, whose gender is different from the sex recorded at their birth, which actually isn't possible, but anyway, transgender or another gender non-binary, or this category of intersex. People may belong to one or more of these groups. So in the 2023 census, 144 plus people, 4.1% of the census, reported a sexual identity other than heterosexual. This included homosexual, 47,000, bisexual, 78,000, and sexual identity not elsewhere classified. 4.1%, 1 in 25 people. Now, based on media coverage, you would think that it was only 1 in 25 people who were heterosexual. Anyway, and then it says in 2023 for transgender, just over 26,000, 0.7% of the population. This included transgender male, 5,000, transgender female, slightly more, 5,700, and transgender person of another gender. Okay, I'm not sure how that works. And then they say that there is 0.4% that are intersex, 26,000. Now, if you listen to the media, for example, in Stuff, they recently said that it was, 2.3%, which is 5 times more than it actually is. The University of Waikato, they said it could be up to 4%. But remember, intersex is a verifiable diagnosis and actually should not be part of the LGBT identity umbrella anyway. Now, here's something you probably didn't know. Wellington has the highest proportion of LGBTIQ plus people. It's the gayest village in the city. Okay, I know you already knew that. In fact, it's right out there, right up the top there, by far. And apologies to our Wellington friends. But remember, this is where the Ministry of Education is based, pushing the RSE curriculum, and the Ministry of Health, sorting policies on puberty blockers. And the results also showed that young adults, 15 to 24, make up the largest proportion of people with another gender, which is probably not surprising given the indoctrination that has been going on, but it's still around, that's 1% on average, 1% to 1.25%. That's it. Okay, so remember what we're saying? 4.1% of the population have a sexual identity other than heterosexual, maybe gay, lesbian or bisexual, and 0.7% of the population are transgender or non-binary or something else and different to their biology at birth. So 4.1 plus the 0.7 is how they got to 4.9%, rounding up and down. But they've already admitted individuals can belong to more than one of the categories. And how many of the transgenders are likely to be the boring old heterosexual? So they may be in both groups. in the 4.1 and the 0.7. So 4.9% is actually very, very generous, and it's actually misleading by Stats NZ. Now, here's the other really interesting bit. Stats NZ also published the LGBT plus population data in 2021, and it's based on the Household Economic Survey for the year ended June 2021. It's a survey of about 16,000 households, which involves more than 32,000 people aged 18 over. So it's one of our major data collection points for Stats NZ. It's a big survey outside of the census. And here's what the 2021 results said. 54,700 people who were exclusively gay or lesbian, people sexually attracted to their own gender. 54,700. What was the figure in the census just released? 47,600. It's dropped 13% in 2 years, despite all the marketing, media, and indoctrination. Okay, let's just forget we saw that. Moving on. The concerning aspect in all of this, on a serious note, is that Statistics NZ has been captured by gender identity politics. But they're going to realise just how difficult and confusing and subjective the issue is. Statistics should deal in actual measurable, definable realities, not subjective standards with no measurement that can change. And remember, this census, I could be male. Next census, I could identify as female. The following year, I might be both, or neither. The following census, I'm unsure. And my sexuality could be all over the place. Okay, I'm just kidding here, by the way. But it can change. If it's based on identity, it will change. Now, Stats NZ actually admit that might be the case in their guidelines. They say, quote, people may identify with more than one gender identity, end quote. You see, Statistics NZ will never make these groups happy. Even gender identity activists are complaining and saying it's still problematic. Stats NZ need to stick to their core role, statistics, and leave the social engineering and wokeness and cultural narratives to others. Statistics should be independent, factual, non-biased, and accurate, because when they're not, when they're misrepresented, then it destroys their credibility. And when it's coming from government data, then I think we should all be concerned.